for the friends coming from other countries, I have one good news and one bad news. The bad news is that we're going to talk about Italy this afternoon. I understand that it's not always easy to understand what's going on in Italy. And so this is the bad news. But could be interesting to follow the debate about our situation within Europe, within the rest of the world, with the background we built all together yesterday afternoon and this morning. So I wish to thank on giving us a clear-cut picture with different opinions, obviously, about world, Europe, and the rest of the world. Not like has been done, China and the rest of us, that somebody suggested to be the rest of the USA. The good news is that in some way we are going to talk in Italian, since since we are debating each other. Well, I don't know. Well, we can also talk in English if you wish. Okay. So we start in English, then we'll see what will happen along the afternoon. So two bad news, actually. We're talking about Italy in English, so you can understand a little better than the Italian language. Now, I would propose to organize this final section to present the first three presentations. And then I asked some other friends if they have to leave or what, the order in which they are supposed to intervene is an alphabetic order. So maybe we change that order according to the different situations, personal situation. Filippo Calciano is going to give the speech instead of Roberto Mazzotta, who cannot be here because he had to leave yesterday night for a personal question, quite important, medical question. So, and then Marco Magnani will present the overview. Marco Magnani is the responsible general director, very recently, I think, appointed of economics. Yeah, but he has been there since many, many years anyway, from the Bank of Italy. And then we will open the floor to the debate, to all the other friends. And I thanks them, everybody, to accepted our invitation to be in this workshop. As you can see, it's a workshop. It's more work than shop, actually, but it's sunny days, so you can have some chance to shopping around Rome instead of shopping here. Now, I will start with my own presentation. Può mettere la mia? Grazie. You can see some slides are in Italian, so some other in English, but you can understand the graph and numbers. First of all, a premise. What we have been saying each other yesterday and this morning, it's obviously my opinion, that doesn't involve your own responsibility, not the one of my institution, which is Economia Reale, which is this kind of little center of studies. But two premises. First question, is there a world crisis? My answer is no. There is a European crisis. The second premise is, within the European crisis, Is there an Italian crisis? And the answer is yes. And I just repeat what I showed yesterday. This is the rate of growth over the last maybe 12 years, and then the next 6 years, so more or less around 20 years. The black line is the world GDP, and then you can see that whatever happened during these 20 years, the US growth, the euro area growth, and the EU growth have been always below the world growth, which means that the rest of the world is growing much faster than is the performance of Western countries. And as you can see, mainly for the future, while the US economy seems to recovery in the next years better, and we had a lot of contribution on this, European and Euro area, European Union and Euro area will still lag behind until 2018. And within this European crisis, the dotted line is Italy. So Italy is following, obviously, the path of the European economy, of the Euro area, but is following that path with a lag. Lagging behind with respect to the Euro area, with respect to the European Union, and we all together lag behind with respect to the United States and the rest of the world. Now, let me explain you what I call the mystery of public finance in Italy, because without understanding this mystery, you cannot judge the economic policy that we have been performing over the last 10, 20, 12 years, and we cannot understand what we are going to perform in the next years. So it's a mystery because when I was young, which is 40 decades ago, unfortunately, I started to read newspaper. I was in the US that time, but I was reading Italian newspapers. And every single month, every single year, every single budget law, I was told that Italy did cut government expenditure and did increase tax revenues. So the mystery is, after 25 or 30 years of expenditure cut and tax revenue raising, why we have the third debt of the world? This is some kind of arithmetic that doesn't work. If we cut expenditure, if we raise taxes year after year, how happen that we always increase the debt, and we are left with the third debt of the world? That's the mystery. Actually, it's not a mystery, but the root of the mystery is the way in which we present any kind of proposal in terms of economic policy. Doesn't change with respect to government changes. It's the same method over the years, and we had the First Republic, the Second Republic, we had center-left government, center-right government. Nothing seems to change. The root of the mystery is that when you read in the newspapers or in the TV that in Italy we are going to cut expenditure, is not true. When you read that we raised taxes over the last 10, 12 years, it was true. But what was not enough to run after government expenditure. I did the trick myself. I go very quickly on this. When you read that Italy is going to cut 40, 50 billion euro of expenditure, to what data are these proposals referred to? Now, the trick is that, unlike the US, when President Obama or even the previous president, they used to have the union budget, they say, well, last year we spent $1 billion in defense. Next year, we will spend a little more or a little less of what we spent last year, which is the standard ruling for households, for corporations. Whenever you have a budget, you say, in this item, and I will spend more than last year. In this other, I will spend less than last year's. Okay? This is not the method applied in Italy. So whenever you read the 30 billion euro government expenditure tax, it is referred to the forecast of expenditure for future years. Let me give you an example. If I did spend 100 euro last year, we start in the Ministry of Treasury in Italy. I have been fighting for more than 20 years within the ministry in this specific method. Well, the Minister of Economy, the Treasury Minister, comes out to say, we forecast to spend next year 130 euros. Then obviously the poor ministry that is in charge in that moment said, well, we have to cut 20 euros. So everything and everybody is fighting against this huge cut of 20 euro over 130. But the 130 is referred to, for instance, this year, to 2014. And if he is successful on obtaining that 20 euro cuts, the real result is that from the 100 years spent this year, the expenditure will increase to 110. Okay? This is the trick. And this is a very easy mystery to be revealed. Now, I picked up all the official documents, so official data, available in the website of the Ministry of Economy and Finance, MEF. And I put all together, the most recent one since 2008. And you can see, don't see anything. Okay, if you read this data, if you could read this data along the vertical line, you see the sequence of different documents, government document, official. If you read on a vertical line, you see the cut of expenditure. But the real historical data are obtained by reading in the horizontal line. So if you see the bottom line, you can see all the minus sign. Document after document, we did cut government expenditure. But if you see along the horizontal line, you see that we cut in the way I explained it before. So de facto, on the last column of the table, you will see the effective increase in government expenditure. And this is total government expenditure. Also, worst is current account government expenditure. Now, interest payments are considered to be reducing, document after document. De facto, they are increasing year after year. This is even current account expenditure net of interest payments. The same. What we did really cut is government investments. We had the peak in 2003, and we cut by 50% in 2011. Now, if you consider an economic policy in which you raise taxes, and this tax increase is running after current account government expenditure, and then to obtain a financial equilibrium called austerity, I would call stupidity and fake economic policy. So you cut investment, you raise taxes, you increase current account government expenditure, you decrease investments. After 10 years, what can you come out with in terms of growth? and what you come out with in terms of tax revenue. So while we increase taxes, the tax revenue decreased because of the decrease of growth. And this is the table. I'm sorry, it's in Italian, it's too far. Believe me, the numbers are there. But you can have the paper version of the paper. In the meantime, fiscal pressure is increasing. Fiscal pressure is increasing, GDP is decreasing, tax revenue does not increase as in the ex-ante intention, but at the end is increased. And then you have to take into consideration that more or less, according to what we know, 20% of Italians do not pay taxes. So this fiscal pressure is the average, but it's much more if you consider that only 80% pay taxes and the other pay more or less zero. Obviously, we did make a good effort to reduce deficit. But this is what I call the dog cheating its tail, because we do the effort to reduce deficit in the wrong way, which is increase taxes and cut investments. You have less growth, and year after year, we should balance the budget in 2003. And I said, it's not possible in 2 years. I was there since 2001. In 2 years, balance the budget. No, we have the rest of the European Union, financial markets, and so on. But it's not possible. So we did the effort, and we never balanced the budget in 2003, 2004. In the last few years, we reduced the deficit, but without ever balancing the budget. So the result what is? That the debt is increasing year after year. And growth is breaking down, and from 2-3% growth, after 10 years, we are left with zero growth, not zero deficit, zero growth, and unfortunately over the last 2 years, we have minus 2.4 last year, minus 1.8 this year, and so on. What we lost in the last 6-7 years is a potential of 300 billion GDP. And you can consider the consequences in terms of employment and so on. And then we go to European Union and meeting and we say we have to do a plan for young people, employment and so on. And as was told this morning, I have many critics toward Mrs. Merkel and Germany, but I do believe they are perfectly and deeply right on saying, but Italy has a lot of resources. So why ask us what you should do? That's why this section, the title we put is Italy, homework to be done anyway. Because there is a strange game around the world. Europe waits, asks the rest of the world to solve European problems. Italy asks European Union and the Euro area countries to solve Italian problems. I would say we should go the other way around. Italy has to resolve our own problem and then put the problems in terms of the European Union and so on. Now, in real synthesis, let's see the mystery from recent years, from 2000 to 2012. What happened? With the trick I mentioned before. In 2000, the total government revenue was 536 billion euro. In 2012 was 764. So in this 12 years, we increased tax revenues by 228 billion euro current account, meaning current price, okay? What we did over this 12 years, how we did use this 228 billion of tax increase, tax revenue increase. You can see that 200 and for the total of government expenditure, 269 was the increase in total expenditure. So what happened? The 228 billion euro of higher tax revenue were not sufficient to run after the increase of total expenditure. And also worse than this, 274 was the increase of current account expenditure, while the investment were reduced by 8 billion euro on the average in this year. And then you can have an explanation, the attribution of what kind of government was running the country in that 12 years. The Berlusconi government increases taxes by 156 billion euro, but increased government expenditure by 233 billion euro. Obviously, has been running the country for 8 years, so it's a longer period. The center-left government ran that country for 2 years, and they increased taxes by 52 billion euro, and they increased government expenditure, current account government expenditure by 60 billion. So a little bit more in equilibrium. And the last year, run by what we call the technical government by Mr. Monti, in 1 year, that government raised tax revenue by 20 billion euro, but total government expenditure only by 7. So it's the first time that the increase of taxes, that was quite huge, all at once in 1 year, but the 70% of that increase of taxes were used to reduce deficit. Only 7-8 billion were used to finance increase in expenditure. Now, this is the past. Let's see the future. The future comes out from the last official document, which is the document of economy and finance issued by the government last April 10th. And even this document is within the website. What are the figures forecasted for the next 5 years? In the next 5 years, what is written there, total government revenue will increase almost by 100 billion euro from 2012 to 2017. Again, we can ask the following question. What use we will do in the next coming year of this 100 euro of higher tax revenue? And you can see almost 70 billion will be used to cover increase in total expenditure. 75 to finance increase in current account expenditure, and only with -5 billion euro in terms of government investment. And only 30 billion over 100 will be used to reduce the forecasted government deficit. So even in the next 5 years, we have a huge increase in taxes. 1/3 will be used to reduce deficit, austerity, but 2/3 will be used to finance further increase in current account government expenditure with the investment cutting down by 5 billion. These are official data. You can find, I repeat, in the website. Now, let's go to our forecast. This is the 8th year that our Economia Reale Centro Studi propose this kind of analysis and forecast. Obviously, we have to start from the trend, official trend of the document I have mentioned, the document of April 10. But on top of that, we used to do some kind of base trend made out by Oxford Economics model. We have been using that model for 8 years. This time is the first time we use the new version of the model, thanks to Emilio Rossi and the Oxford Economics staff that allowed us to use their model. And we will see that there are some kind of incoherence within the official document. First, with respect to the growth path they describe in the official document, is not very well understandable how happened that the debt GDP ratio goes down in the last 2 years of the 5 years. It's not explained. And also, consequently, the breaking down in the increase of unemployment rate. This is not explaining. So we refer to the trend base that we obtained by the use of Oxford Economic Model. And then we plugged into the model our own proposal to see if something else could be done. Let me give you the result. If we do follow the path of the official government of April, it's the very last one, and we are waiting now a new updating for the new government, obviously, because the new government has to take the responsibility to say, these are the trend, these are our economic policy proposal, and these are the difference with respect to the data that appears as a trend of the Italian economy and public finance in the next 5 years. So if we take that official document, what are the major results? That GDP in real terms of year 2007 will be recovered by the Italian economy between 2018 and 2020. This is what is written there. Not in this way, but if you pick the data, and you can see what is the result. Second, the unemployed rate we had in 2007 is the black line, will be reached again after the peak that will be in 2014, next year, this year, next year. That unemployment rate, which was in 2007 around 7.5, as you can see, will be back to 7.5 around 2022. So I would say, are these perspectives not simply acceptable, but sustainable by the real social and economic condition of Italian households, enterprises, and social cohesion? Can we say to people, we will wait to end 2020 for having the same income of 2007, and for unemployed, they say, well, wait 2022 and you will get back to work? Please do consider that in the meantime, in this case, we would have lost 15 years of trend. Because at that time we go back to 2007, but having lost 15 years of possible trend in terms of growth, employment, and so on. Now, we do believe that this is a not sustainable condition. So what? There is no way out. As I mentioned this morning and yesterday, Italy could be a surprise for many of you, but by absurd, is the European country with the most important resources to be spent for growth. Why? Because as we have been told by official Italian institutions, in the figure you saw in total government expenditure, it's over 800 billion euro per year. There are, we were told, at least 50, 60 billion euro in specific items, health, expenditure, subsidies and whatever, 50, 60 billion euro, which are simply wastes, corruption. But in any case, no growth, no contribution to growth can come out from that kind of expenditure. So 50, 60 billion on one side. Then on the tax revenue side, we lack an estimate of 100 billion euro for tax evasion. So Italy is the only European country in which 150 billion euro a year, these are flows, could be used, switched from one side to the other to have growth and employment. Obviously, you have to go the other way around. You have to cut current account government expenditure. You have to cut tax for household, for workers, for corporations. You have to increase investments. Obviously, you cannot do in 1 day, 1 month, or 6 months. But you can have a 3-year plan in which you say, okay, stop it. So what we have done in the model, as our proposal, we said, why don't we apply some kind of ZBB, as the US do since many decades? What is the ZBB? It's using the good sense of household and companies. We say, in this hypothesis, we said, let's take specific items of current account government expenditure fixed at 2012 level. So any kind of administration can continue to spend in the future years exactly the same amount they spent in 2012. I'm not cutting anything. I'm saying you continue to spend whatever you have spent. If we do this, and this could be done by law, giving budgets, and the budget is what you spent historically, year after year, we are freeing a huge amount of resources. At the end of the 5th year, we have 45 billion euro available. And in the meantime, you stop the increase in that kind of government expenditure, then year after year, you decrease personal income tax, corporate tax, a strange tax, which is in Italy called IRAP, and you have room to increase government investments, human capital investments, or whatever you do. So if you do this smoothly over the next 3-4 years, but you start tomorrow, stopping current account government expenditure, these are the results. Here, very quickly to hand, you face DEF are the figures of the official government document, is the dark line. Base is what came out applying the official document data to the Oxford economics model. And ER is the alternative economic policy of Economia Reale that I quickly illustrated a few moments ago. And you can see that we cannot do any miracle, but instead of waiting 2022 to recover in terms of unemployment, we could recover in 2018. The growth rate, instead of, this is an optimistic view, instead of lagging until 2015 below 1% and then they forecast to have something like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4% in the long run. We could, in some way, go over 2%, which is not a miracle. I wouldn't say 5% or 7% as in China, but 2%. This is the unemployment rate I already mentioned. Total unemployed. Well, you see that in the base, we will be back to below 3 million unemployed people in 2018. With the alternative economic policy, we could go down in 2018 below 2 million unemployed people. So the difference is almost 1 million people in 5 years. And this is the other way. I mean, total employment can increase more or less 1 million with respect to 2012. We have 22,900,000 employed people in Italy. We are going down in 2013, this year and next year. Then we recover, but the recovery, according to the base hypothesis, will be only in 2018 in terms of total employment, while our recovery could be in 2015, and at the end of the period, 2018, we can have almost 901 million employed in addition. And obviously, government debt. I mentioned it before, in the official data of the government, it's not clear why the government debt should decline after 2015. Our base condition gives us the opposite way, will increase in the years. The alternative we propose decrease a little bit the total of government debt. Not too much, but a little bit is decreasing. Obviously, the deficit in percent of GDP is really much better because higher growth and higher employment. And in absolute value, we will have better performances in terms of government deficit. And the ratio between debt and GDP, as you can see, is not explainable why should decrease to 117 in 2017 according to the official data of the government. According to the base, will still be well over 125, 127, but in terms of our hypothesis, the green line is a little better path, even in terms of debt to GDP ratio. This is nominal GDP, and these are the tables. So I stop here. The final question is, there is no debate about austerity and growth. This is a fake debate. The real debate is how you use the resources to make growth and to reach financial stability in a much stronger way and maybe in a quicker time. Obviously, you can ask why, since many years, few people did propose this kind of economic policy in Italy, but has never been done. The answer is very clear. It's a political answer. Within the figure I gave you, in terms of wastage, corruptions, and in terms of tax evasion, I estimate that at least 1 million Italians, friends of ours maybe, they can live very well using that kind of expenditure and not paying taxes. And obviously, on the other side, there are the 56 million of Italians that do pay taxes, they do not have good public services, and they have lesser and lesser opportunities in terms of jobs, and then it's the break generation by generation. But I don't believe that this kind of domestic problem could be solved asking Europe to do a plan for young employment, or the other way, for Europe to go to the G8 or the international summit to say we have to solve the problem of world growth. I end as I started. It appears not to be a world crisis. It's a European crisis. Within Europe, there is an Italian crisis, but both can be solved by will of people, by will of political responsibility in a wider sense, which is not only the responsibility of the government, of the parliament, but also first is government and parliament, but also of the society which is around, because many times it happens to me to do this kind of proposal, to have the first opposition within the government, then the second position within the parliament, but the strongest opposition within the society, because nobody wishes to touch that kind of framework. The only positive forecast I can do is that this cannot go on any further than the next 6 months. So 10 years ago, somebody could tell me, well, why should we do this? We have time. We will do next year or 3 years from now. My position now is this is very optimistic, because we have to take people, politicians, governments, and institutions acquainted that there is no time anymore. So we have to decide even a day before, or unfortunately a day after, without referring obviously the very well-known American movie, The Day After. I would prefer the day before. So I stop here and I pass the floor to Filippo Calciano for his own presentation.
Thank you, Mario. And thank you to everybody on behalf of the Istituto Sturzo. Thank you for being here, for sharing your views and approaches with us, with the hope that this would be just the first of a series of regular meetings, perhaps in the future, in which we can meet together and discuss and confront and compare our approaches, our point of views, and try to figure out solutions and paths. So I will be brief, and I will not go through data. We have seen a lot of data. The presentation from Mario was very important, very interesting, and Mario gave us a big picture. I will instead try to discuss some hints, some suggestions, and go to the supply side. So instead of considering the macro environment, let's try to discuss something which is more related in general to the supply side of the economic system, and also to the social situation. So not only, not only economics, also considerations in terms of what the social texture of Italy is going to be, and what kind of challenges we have to. Oh, sorry, my telephone. Thank you. What kind of challenges we have to deal with. Italy, homework to be done anyway. This is the title. Let me rephrase the title. What should a relatively small economy, a regional economy, do to deal with a changing world? Because this is, in my view, the situation. Italy is a relatively small economy compared with the geopolitical areas, of course. But also France is a relatively small economy. Also Germany is a relatively small economy if taken in isolation. Well, the first thing should be try to be considered as an attractive place for what? For investments, for business, for buying products by the rest of the world. In Italy, the FDI, the foreign direct investments, have accounted for 1.1% of GDP over the period 2005-2011, 1.1%, so it's not even peanuts, which means that we are not so attractive. Perhaps we should stop trying to catch up with China. This attitude to catch up, to follow, we should instead try to identify our comparative advantages and work on those. In my opinion, what is happening is a global, non-reversible reallocation of production all over the world, and this production will be traded back among countries. So it's international trade. So in some sense, comparative advantages will play a role in driving the production, the specialization of countries, and the trade among the new geopolitical areas. Why don't we try to identify our comparative advantages? We have many comparative advantages. We have sectors in which traditionally we have comparative advantages, pieces of an industrial manufacturing sector, beverage, luxury, for example, food. Of course, we are going to lose the absolute advantages, which means that in other places, the product that we produce will be produced with a lower cost. But what we have to do is not to try to lower our production cost. What we should do is to shift our production within sectors toward those products in which we have a better relative production cost. So it's just a matter of considering relative prices instead of absolute prices, and I think it's important. Of course, to do so, this is concerned with a reallocation of production within the country, within sector. To do so, we need to develop a better business environment. We don't have in Italy a good business environment. There is a list of things. Some examples I consider particularly important: better education, better corporate and financial education. We have in Italy mid-market firms that do not have a CFO, for example, so a chief financial officer. In Italy and in Europe, the banking system is no longer the right way to finance growth. And we don't have alternatives yet. So these are very important and almost structural problems. But I'm getting bored of this to-do list because we know what we need, I think. The real problem is why we don't do what we need. Why we're considering Italy on average, the country Italy is locked into something that can easily evolve into a new poverty trap. I think this is because we don't have any longer any social contract, which is a non-economic concept. It is the civil texture which is deteriorating in Italy. And there is a lot of room for politics, of course. But we need a kind of politics and a kind of economic policy in particular that can be able to generate a new social contract, which is generative in some sense. And Mario gave some examples of these policies. For example, in Italy, the fight against tax evasion, which is, of course, right per se, generates a new social contract only if it is paired with a deep, real reform of our inefficient public sector. So in this respect, we need to select and to pick economic policies which are able to renovate, in some sense, our civil texture, our social contract, and the selection of these policies is a very difficult task, I think. Then what should a relatively small economy do is try to merge with partners. And here, the European dimension gets really important. I am an optimistic person. I think that this crisis has made everybody understand that nobody can survive in isolation. The point is to merge with who? It seems to me that, for example, Germany seems happier to merge with China than with Italy and Spain. And I think this is the real obstacle to the constitution of the so-called United States of Europe. It is a typical free-riding issue. Some EU countries think that they can get the benefits of being part of the club without paying any membership fee to the club. And in this respect, the fee consists in giving up pieces of national powers. To what and why? It should be understood that a partial give-up of national powers today has the aim to preserve these national powers. On a higher scale tomorrow, we are going to lose our national powers in any way. So, new social contract, new economic policies, consider and work and on our comparative advantages, and at the European level, the free riding issues is very difficult to overcome. Time perhaps is not. We need more time. We need more debate. We need more discussion. And many European countries need to understand that paying this membership fee of being part of the European club is important and is necessary for them as well, and it pays back. So conclusion, I will be very short. Altogether, I consider that this point are part of our homework, and invite you all to give us even more homework, of course, in order to face the challenges of tomorrow all together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Filippo. I forgot to tell you that I did have to change the tie. I was granted the tie by a friend, and this is the official Italian tie with small Italian flags. That's why the section this afternoon is in Italy. I ask Pietro Ichino, that has to leave to Milan, to give his own contribution now.
Thank you, Mario. I would like to highlight two main contradictions that I see in our dominant labor policies, and in particular in the culture, dominant culture of the labor movement leaders in Italy. The first contradiction I see in the present conjuncture of severe crisis stays in that, well, I see a contradiction between the tendency of Italian labor movement to put today John Maynard Keynes on its flags, and on the other hand, the strong refusal of our labor movement of a series of measures, of tools for the functioning of industrial relation system, which could be considered as a modern version of Keynesian receipt. We could roughly summarize the Keynesian receipt as the proposal of public expenditure combined with inflation as a remedy against the downward rigidity of nominal salaries. But inflation means a sort of flat taxation which jeopardizes much more salaries than other revenues. Now, if labor movement leaders like so much Keynesian prescription, why do they so strongly refuse a much more soft and, so to say, intelligent line of action, as is a decentralization of the collective bargaining system, which allows to adapt labor standards to the specific circumstances of each single firm, reducing where a reduction is needed, but not reducing standards or even increasing them when this is the case. Half the labor movement in Italy is strongly convinced that a rigidly centralized collective bargaining system is useful in order to establish minimum standards which should exclude from the labor market companies that are not able to comply with such standards. This scheme implies that when a company goes under standard, we accept that it closes and its workers migrate towards more efficient companies. In fact, the practical behavior of our trade unions, but also of a large majority of our political representatives, be they left-wing or right-wing representatives, is fully inconsistent with the ratio of the bargaining system centralization. When a company manages to close, it rarely happens that trade unions and politicians invite workers to accept to be engaged in a mobility process towards more suitable employment, or activating measures aimed at sustaining workers' revenues in mid-time and aimed at specifically training them in relation with the skill shortages. We have thousands and thousands of skill shortages in each Italian region, which are not matched by the offer of the supply, labor supply. Instead, our trade union leaders and politicians prefer to pay unemployment benefits without conditions, without conditioning the payment of benefits to the effective availability of the worker for new jobs, or even what is reasonably needed for meeting a new job. The main result is that unemployment spells of Italian workers laid off by large companies are much longer than unemployment spells of workers coming from smaller companies. But another result is that these workers are kept for years and years in a very poor condition, earning much less than 1,000 euros per month, and mostly de facto encouraged to enter the irregular labor market, where standards of terms and conditions are much lower than those fixed by central collective contracts. My conclusion is that the political culture of which dominates inside the labor movement, but also the political culture which dominates inside the left-wing and right-wing Italian politicians has the effect with the two main contradictions that I have tried to highlight here, have the effect of keeping Italian workers in a worse condition than they could be if we accepted a different way to face the necessity of the mobility in the labor market, and the rigidity of the centralized bargaining system. The effects of this system are much worse than a decentralized bargaining system, decentralized way of determination of work standards. Germany has done a very deep reform of its labor market and labor collective bargaining system 10 years ago. 2 years ago, our trade unions and entrepreneur organizations have agreed a very partial reform, a very shy change towards the decentralization of the bargaining system. I think that the whole Italian economic system suffers from this this handicap, and I wouldn't say that our problems can be identified, fully identified with these defaults, but I think that a different regulation of labor market would give quite an important contribution to the solution of our national problems. Thank you for your attention, and I am sorry if I would be obliged to leave our meeting in a few minutes, but I must be in Milan at 8 this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pietro. Thank you very much. And now the floor is to Marco Magnani, who is the head of the Structural Economic Analysis Department at the Bank of Italy.
Yes, thank you, Mario. So I'll pick up, I will be quite brief, me as well. I'll pick up to start with one point Professor Baldassare made at the beginning of his speech, that is, we don't have to wait for Europe in order to have our problems to be solved, but we should do our homework anyway, which is quite a sensible concept. I would add this one, a further elaboration, that being able to do our homework, it helps very much, at least in the case of Italy, at least, it helps very much also for Europe. And this relation between structural reform processes in national countries and progresses in European integration, this relation goes both ways. It goes from nations to Europe and from Europe to the single nation. So in this sense, we should feel that our responsibility in being able to make advances in our structural reforms, our responsibility is not simply towards our country, but is also in some way with respect to Europe. This should be, I think it's important to underline this. I'm coming now to the Italian problem stricto sensu. First, I'd like to underline the fact that the dimension of the homework we are facing is not simply a matter of a problem of a cyclical recession, but it's a problem which has an historical scope, a very big historical scope. This, I think, is the lesson we have to draw from the recent history of our country, that is, in spite of the fact that the numbers, the macroeconomic numbers, became dramatic in the last 2 years, with GDP falling. I mean, Mario said that also. I mean, the GDP fell by almost 8% with respect to 2007, disposable income of households by 9%, industrial production by 25%. So these are very big numbers, which are unprecedented in Italy, I mean, after World War II. But in spite of this dimension of numbers, we have to, I think the basic point is the fact that our problem started long before the actual financial crisis. And this can be seen quite easily, as has been noted a lot of times in last years, looking at the growth performance of Italy in the last 15, 20 years, at least, let's say, from the beginning of the 90s. So the essential issue is not a cyclical issue. The essential issue for our country, for Italy, is a structural adjustment issue. We had, due to technological IT, information technology, communication technologies, and globalization phenomena in its broader sense, we had an external context which changed a lot, changed very much in very few years, very few years, and our economy, because of a lot of reasons, I want to analyze it here, I mean, showed itself unable to face this adjustment necessity. This is the core of the problem in Italy, and it must be said that this problem involves a lot of different aspects. It involves accumulation, it involves product specialization and organization of production. It has been said also by a speaker before me. It involves also the different career paths of people. It involves the education system, the essential characteristics of welfare system, position. I mean, a lot of different aspects, not just of the economy, but also of society. So I think this should be underlined because otherwise we don't understand the depth of the crisis which is hitting Italy now. And in this sense, I think we have to understand that we can compare this historical passage of our country with a few other passages in Italian history. I think of just the period of the Golden Age after the war, or the first period of the Italian takeoff at the turn of the 19th century. I come here to the second point I want to pick up, which is about the social contract. You spoke about the social contract. I agree very much with you on this point. There is an economist who, analyzing history in different countries after World War II, defined the concept of social capability, which is Abramovitz in the 80s, which is, let's say, a set of rules, institution, behavior of people in the economy, which is efficient enough to sustain the catching up of a system. This is what we need, I think, in this new phase, in this new stadium of the history of the economy of Italy. And in order to achieve this social capability, or from a different point of view, a new social contract, we have to collect the contribution of the different actors, which means basically firms. I don't insist on that point, but it's quite clear what I mean. Labor, banks, it has been said that probably in this now, in order to sustain growth, we need other financial instruments or other financial markets, not just banks, as it is in Italy or in Europe generally in these years. We need also the contribution of politics, of course, and this is, I would say the contribution of politics is absolutely essential, and we know that. And I think that without being able to mobilize all these different categories, we won't be able to find a solution for the actual crisis. We don't start from zero. That should be, a little bit of courage we need, because we started a process of reform in the last 2 years. The structural reforms has been launched in particular by the last government. They are all important, they all move in the right direction, but I think we have to be honest and we have to recognize that the velocity of this process has been reduced in the last months, and probably we need now not only to complete, to implement the reforms which has been already thought or already designed, which is a typical, very traditional problem for Italy. The fact of implementation, not just of design of interventions, but probably we have also, and I quote the governor of the Bank of Italy in his last final remarks a few days ago, probably we need also a different approach to the whole process of structural reform, that is not simply to think of them in a sequential way, but the problem is of being able to conceive them as part of a bigger picture that immediately clarifies goals, implications, and benefits of the whole process. It's difficult, but from a methodological point of view, I think it is essential in order to keep the process going and not just fading out like hopefully not, but like it is now, at least like it's now appearing. I don't want to go into the details of public finance. Professor Baldassarre shows, in his presentation, said a lot of interesting things, I think. I want just to underline one point, which is, of course, for us very important, and this is the fact that fiscal consolidation is in any case a necessity now. And of course, it is in the medium run a precondition of growth that we know that already, but which is important to understand is a very simple fact that without confirming consolidation in, of course, with col buon senso, I mean, cum grano salis, we won't be able to convince definitely markets which are still looking at us with a sort of we are still under scrutiny of financial market. We need selective intervention. Something has been done, also with some macro effect. I think of the payment of general government's commercial debt, which should sustain GDP by 0.5% within 1.5 years. I think of other interventions which are now under scrutiny of parliaments and of the government. The problem is that we have to understand that to believe that growth can be sustained by systematic deficit spending is really, this idea is a dangerous illusion. We had that already in Italian history, and this makes me think of a connected problem. I mean, somebody is saying or is thinking, okay, if we hadn't the euro, if you hadn't all the constraints of the eurozone, we could devaluate, we could have deficit spending, and we could be in a very happy world. This was exactly the situation we had in the 70s, which we had a lot of deficit spending, we had a lot of devaluation, and these years were the beginning of our structural problem and of our public finance problem. And debt started to grow exactly in these years. So I think that without understanding that without a deep structural reform process, we won't, in any case, solve our crisis. This is the first thing we have to understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you, Marco. And now is the Giorgio, Di Giorgio.
Okay. Thank you, Mario. I have some slides. Clearly, when you talk towards the end of a conference, you run the risk of repeating something. Let me start with some numbers, and I would like to underline the point already done by Marco, that Italy decline started much before the recent crisis, actually more than 20 years ago. If you look at the dynamics of a rough but still pretty useful indicator of citizens' welfare, like GDP per capita, you see that the rate of growth in Italy has been much lower than the euro area average already since the 90s, while it was outperforming the euro area average and the US in the years before. And this notwithstanding the fact that when you look at the rate of growth on the world economy, actually even the years of the crisis don't look that bad. I mean, in average terms, the rate of growth in the world economy stayed more or less constant, around also currently is around a little bit higher than 3%, which is more or less the rate of growth that was average in the 80s and the 90s. The composition of growth is totally different, is totally in favor of the emerging countries, with the developed countries that are lagging behind. And notice that this catching up of the emerging countries happened in the last 10 years, right after they put inflation under control. So the message here is that price stability is not in conflict with growth. Actually, it's maybe a prerequisite for growth. And when you look at the performance of the single economies, the Italian economy, together with Spain, and actually until recently also the UK, is one of the worst. Let me list our structural problems. This is a slide for our foreign guests. Because in Italy, unfortunately, we all know these problems pretty well. So we have low productivity, low competitivity, inefficient labor and good markets, an excessive weight of small, medium enterprises and of micro firms, among the latter. We have excessive bureaucracy. The service sectors are highly regulated and protected, costly and inefficiently provided local public services, inadequate infrastructures. high cost of politics, and too many decision levels. This is very interesting. We actually lack a culture of assessment, evaluation, intervention, monitoring procedures in public spending. Mario was pretty explicit about that before. We have too many laws and rare enforcement of the latter. There's low and inefficient justice, high taxes on families and firms, low social expenditure if we exclude pensions. And actually, the decline of the Italian economy is divided into all the economic sectors. The quota of Italian exports at the world level accounted for 3.4% of total world manufacturing production in 2010, while it was higher than 4% in 2000. These numbers decline in all the economic sectors that we list. Unemployment is rising, although it's close to the European Union average. We have very low employment rates, especially among women, especially in the South. And if you look at the youth unemployment rates, this is an unbelievable indicator of divergence between the peripheral countries, especially Italy and Spain and Germany. And this makes a very strong point about intergenerational equality or inequality that is arising in the country. Not everything goes that bad. We also have some points of relative strength. For example, in terms of structural fundamentals, if you look at the foreign net position as a percentage of GDP or the current account imbalance as percent of GDP, Italy looks much better than other peripheral countries in the euro area. Also, Italy is still producing and is still exporting. Net of the energy component, our balance of payment is still active and has always been active. And also, we have now more or less corrected our current fiscal balance. We are close to structural balance, although this fiscal position is fragile because of the very high public debt. So let me state some points. The first point is that we need to change. We need radical change in the country, because basically the current situation is the result, in my view, of very bad system incentives that are around in the economy. For example, we all know that efficiency and competitiveness depend upon product and process innovation. Now, for example, in Italy, private sector expenditure on research and development is much lower and much more than public expenditure with respect to other industrialized countries. The productive system resisted to change and to change sector, becoming very exposed to emerging countries. To the competitive pressures coming from emerging countries. And many voices pointed to the fact that research and development and then innovation is very difficult to obtain if you have a productive system that is mostly done by small firms. Actually, so why do we have so many small and medium enterprises, and why do we have so many micro firms among small and medium enterprises? So there could be two explanations. One is that maybe our capitalists, maybe our entrepreneurs don't look very far. So they want to stay small because they don't see the benefits of investing and growing. Another one is that maybe this is just the rational response to a set of institutional incentives that are simply wrong. And this is the basic role for politics. And actually, as a matter of fact, in the country, small enterprises have been subsidized and protected by distorting and more favorable legislation and practices in terms of accounting, fiscal rules, labor market, credit facilities. They have been also frequently exempted from ordinary controls and monitoring activities. If this is true, clearly there is room for policy intervention. Which kind of policies? There's no much room for standard Keynesian aggregate demand policies. Actually, as a matter of fact, monetary policy is not in town any longer, and is already very expensive at the moment. And fiscal policy is constitutionally constrained, so we don't have space for aggregate Keynesian policies. Maybe microeconomic policies are available. Now, the Monti government, actually also a little bit before, they started a reforming agenda, but the problem in the country is that you start a reform and you never really implement it completely. So there is still a lot to do. Pension reform is something that has been undertaken pretty in an intensive way. Notice that, however, still the pension expenditure is stabilized in Italy, but at a much higher average with respect to other European Union countries. And then many measures have been tried or undertaken, but not completely realized in the field of liberalization, simplification. Also, the spending review has to be continued and reinforced. And think about the reorganization of local entities, which just collapsed some months ago. So all these measures go into the right direction, but I mean, there's still a lot to do in this field. So, as in the private sector, which is responding to the set of incentives that the economic policy should put in place, we have to remember that around 50% of the economy is in the public sector. So our search of efficiency should also look at the public administration. The objective is to transform, or should be to transform, the public administration from a burden to a driver for productive entities. And this regards efficiency in spending composition. As Mario was saying, we need more capital expenditure and less current expenditure. And we have to be clear with it. Sorry, but at the beginning this hurts. And the political parties should state it, should declare it, should actually tell the citizens what they want to do, and if they are different in what they want to do. They have to have some courage. We need this courage in order to choose. Otherwise, it's not clear what we should do, what we should choose. During the last elections in February, the presentation of the programs of the two main parties were absolutely vague. There was not a single measure that was listed in the two main parties. We need more efficiency in social spending. We still spend too much in pensions and too little in assistance, but the assistance helps families and helps production. We need efficiency in health spending, where decentralization did not work. And we need efficiency in the fiscal system. We have to reduce taxes gradually with spending, and we have first to reduce taxes on labor and production. Sorry, but property tax is not a problem. It's a threat, an excuse. You can call it as you want, but it's not a problem. I'm referring to the so-called IMU, which is the property tax that is debated and at the center of the policy debate now. And also, the decision to cancel Equitalia is a very bad signal, because it seems that you want to actually be lax in fighting tax evasion. You can modify the attitude of Equitalia, but there is no clear evidence that going back to the local level will be more effective and will produce more revenues for the state. We don't talk much about dismissions and privatizations. If you want to reduce debt, this is a clear and needed ingredient. It is needed not only to reduce debt, it is needed to reduce waste, to create market spaces. And I think that in most of the cases we should also go out from local public services provided in-house, and this is linked to the lack of a culture of assessment, regulating, select well the providers of public goods, and then adopt serious supervisory models. So the conclusion is that in Italy, we need to continue and strengthen the reforming process. Change is necessary both in the private and in the public sector. Currently, there's little room for Keynesian aggregate measures. Please, no more taxes. We should fight strongly tax evasion. We should reduce public expenditure, because this is a prerequisite to lower also fiscal pressure, which is clearly too high. We should push a recomposition of public expenditure towards more investment in infrastructures and in human capital, lowering business subsidies, reducing expenditure for purchases and health. And these measures have to be complemented with a set of microeconomic policies based on correcting distorting incentives, opening market spaces, improving public administration outcome at constant cost, and trying to have a more effective and efficient justice. So the message is that we should try to use economic policy to provide right incentives to individual actions. And maybe after a few years, actually, I don't know if 5, 10 years will be enough, hope for a new age of dynamism and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giorgio. I would put the other way around. Use economic policy to remove actual disincentive for individual decisions. Then we will see about incentives. Okay, now is Nicola Rossi.
Thank you very much, Mario.
Paul, you understand Italian? Paul, you understand Italian?
He doesn't.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. Thank you very much, as I said. I assume some of you have been discussing European matters in the morning, as well as the European Union economic policy stance, so I will not get back to that. So also I assume that during this morning session, a deeper European integration was considered to be as the way, not just a way, but the way of avoiding a progressive marginalization of the European economy and society, much more than a way to solve the Spanish, the Greek, or for that matter, the Italian problem. So I will not spend any additional word on it. Let me focus on Italy. When the crisis will be over, and if I say in 1 year time, I tend to believe to be very optimistic, to be frank. When the crisis will be over, the Italian economy and society will tend to mimic, in my mind, a post-war scenario. Long-term unemployment will have destroyed and already has a substantial fraction of Italian human capital, which will need to be rebuilt. Firms' foreclosures will have destroyed and have already done large slices of intangible entrepreneurial capital, which will not likely to be rebuilt. So 2 of the most important sources of Italian growth in the last decades will be affected significantly. By how much? This is a difficult question. If I take for granted, say, what the official documents say, I should tend to believe that the Italian potential rate of growth was lowered by the crisis by, say, something like 2 or 3 decimal points. This is not a small figure. This is a very large one, especially in a country like Italy, where the potential rate of growth barely reaches 0.8, 0.9 a year. So 1/3 of the dynamics, so the Italian economy could be lost by the crisis. Much in the same vein, Confindustria estimates that industrial potential level today is the same as in 1990 and 20% lower than the peak of 2008. My personal belief is that both figures are underestimates, unfortunately, and that they will both figures probably underestimated the structural impact of the crisis. Now, the first thing it immediately comes to my mind is that in a post-war scenario, assuming what I said is to some extent true or likely, thinking about a more or less substantial program of public works as some would consider desirable is, frankly speaking, misses entirely the point. It may help. It's aspirin. And if you want to take aspirin, but you are not well at all, you can take aspirin. But it will not solve the problem. Not even if it is agreed with the European Union. It doesn't change anything on that respect. The Italian problem is not one of lacking domestic demand. The Italian problem is a problem of vanishing economic structure. It's definitely much more deeper and serious in my mind. A post-war scenario requires, let me put it this way, going back to basics. Savings should be favored. Foreign capital should be encouraged to come in Italy. Italians should work more. I understand that it may be annoying, put it this way, but that's the easiest way I can put it. All this requires changing the rules of the game, since the existing rules of the game do actually work exactly in the opposite direction. Changing the rules of the game is the essence of institutional change. And this is the very reason about my pessimism about the Italian perspectives. You see, Italian politics focus more than, well, obviously I should say that what Mario said about public finances before is something that should be done anyway, okay? So the fact that I'm not quoting the things he suggests is not because I do not agree. I do agree entirely. But my feeling is that the question is even larger than public finances. I think Mario agrees on that. So Italian politics focuses more than on institutions, the rules of the game, on the organizations. The difference is simple. The rules of the representative democracy are the rules of the game. The parliament and political parties are the organization that lives into that rules. And but if changing the organizations, as Italian policy seems willing to do sometimes, without changing the rules of the games, is a sure recipe for failure. And I'll give you a few examples. In the last 20 years, Italians, fed up with a state which was more or less everywhere, experienced federalism, okay, by reforming the regions. The end result was that we got the worst of both systems. In the last 20 years, we went from proportional voting system to some kind of first-past-the-post system, and then, fed up with that, we went to some sort of somewhat rude version of a North Korean electoral system. North Korean electoral system. The end result is that political participation fell from 80% to 50%. A few months ago, we elected the new parliament. It is largely a new one. If I remember correctly, more than 60% of its members were not in the previous parliament, and is much younger parliament. But all polls suggest that the way Italians look at the parliament is exactly the same as they did a few months ago, before the election, so to speak. Now, in the coming months, 35 plus 7 plus 40, that total 82 people, will be engaged in trying to define a coherent set of changes in the Italian constitutions. My feeling is that, again, we will be focusing on organization, not on the rules of the game, because we don't like talking about the rules of the game. But rules of the game are the key to the Italian problem. And above all, there is one rule of the game which is the key to the Italian problem, and that's the relationship between the citizen and the state. If this relationship is distorted, as it is in Italy, since, I would say, the late 19th century, there's no way we will overcome the crisis. For a number of decades, let's say until post-war World War II, those rules of the games were not appreciably in contrast with the context, so to speak. And Italy managed quite well. In the last 20 years, those rules of the game are simply incompatible with the world we live in. If Italy will not focus on that problem, not in 6 months, but possibly in 6 days, then the perspectives are quite gloom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Obviously, I totally agree, as we have been done over the last maybe 20 years, but nobody seems to bother about what we think. But the example you did about the post-war period, I see this post-war period maybe sooner than 1 year, and maybe before the recovery sign will appear. But this is the only difference I see. Gustavo Pia, please.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you for inviting me. I will try to refrain from seeing economics alone, because I think that if we don't put economics in the context of politics, we are doomed to be irrelevant at the least. So let me start telling you what was the most important sentence I've heard in conferences in the past year from a colleague in Catalonia. He said to me, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. And to me, since I heard that sentence, I always say it. Wherever I go, I say that sentence, because I think it sums up what we're trying to do with this European construction, and in particular with the euro. To me, there is only one concern in my mind: keeping the euro alive for whatever it takes. I think that if we get rid of the euro, we will not be at the table, and we will need 30 years to reconstruct Europe. And why do I say that? Because I don't give a damn, excuse me, for whatever has the smell of long term right now when we talk about economics. I think there is no time, as Mario said. I think that the euro will be broken by a prolonged recession. And I mean it because there will be, with something like a 10% probability, which to me sounds huge, an internal revolt in one country, or a populistic movement, we've read the newspapers today, that will go to power and will force the exit from the euro. The second, these obviously are assumptions that I make, which drive my thought. My second assumption, which a lot of people challenge, is that anything that looks like a Eurobond solution is vastly ridiculous and impossible for whoever knows the Germans. And I'm not going to dwell into this. I think that the Germans are totally right. They don't feel that we are the Eastern Germans. They feel that we are the Italians, and they don't need to give us any solidarity, just as much as in the United States, solidarity appeared in 1930 and not in 1830. So basically, the solution to my short-term problem is exiting the recession without solidarity. And so this is why I think it's relevant, again, as Mario said, to discuss about our internal problem. Now, I know that our problem is twofold. I have read the first page of the OECD report, and I also have seen that between 2001 and 2011, in terms of rate of growth of output per capita, Italy stands as the last, not only the last, in terms of performance, but a negative performance. I've also read the statistics of Eurostat 2 days ago, saying that the first quarter 2013 compared to first quarter 2012, I might remind you that 2012 is the minus 2% year, is minus 2.3%. Greece is minus 5, Portugal is minus 4. So I wonder how we can reach that minus 1.3 that you have put there for 2013. Now, if I go
It's minus 1.8. 1 minus 3 is the official government data.
Yeah, now
Our
OECD is minus 1.8 already.
Yeah, and our forecast is 1.8, minus 1.8.
That's right. Now, if you look at that 1.8 of the OECD, you will read something very interesting behind the lines. For 2013, 2014, export growth in Italy is 3% in 2013. Export growth in Italy in 2014 is up to 5%. So much for competitiveness. I think there is a huge internal demand problem. I think actually when I say that there is a huge internal demand problem, I am talking not as an Italian, but as a European. That +3, +5 figure that I gave you is all driven by exports outside of the euro area. Let me just say before I enter into some stylized facts that I think we've learned, since there is a structural and a cyclical problem, I think we should say one thing. Failed austerity, the way Krugman correctly calls it, has two pillars. The two pillars are what I call non-credible restrictive economic policies. And when I say non-credible, I mean IMF style. I mean faked, rigged. I would like to remind you the huge amount of mistakes that have been done by the Bank of Italy and the Ministry of Economy and Finance in terms of projections amount to approximately mistakes in forecasts that are up to 1% of GDP in 6 months' time. These are numbers that, to me, given the competence that I know are abundant in these two institutions, have nothing to do with an econometric model that does not work. And when I say failed austerity has two pillars, there's another pillar which I would like to discuss about, which is wrong reforms. And when I say wrong reforms, I mean reforms that contribute to recession. Then I have a solution with two pillars, which is called credible expansionary macroeconomic policies. And I would like to remind you that these credible macroeconomic expansions are loved by the markets and make spreads collapse, just like in Japan. And right reforms, in which I mean reforms that help to kill recession. As for the stylized facts of austerity, let me just say, please read every 6 months the ECB report on the questionnaire to SMEs and large firms about what their main problem is. I am sorry, it is not finance. So much for Giavazzi and Alesina today again that say that we need to save the banks. We will save the banks, and these banks will have tons of money to which, that like they have already, that they will not lend to anybody because nobody is demanding credit. Their main problem is not competition. Their main problem is not bureaucracy. For the past 4 years in Europe, the huge main problem for SMEs and large firms has been lack of customers. That is called, to me, demand. Second thing we know, multipliers. Giorgio said, please stop with high taxes. Now, this is a sentence that I've heard so many times, and I totally agree with it. And basically, please stop with high taxes means only one thing. High taxes are recessive. But at that point, when you say, well, then let's talk about low taxes, no, we can't do low taxes. So it's something like as if the multiplier is just going in one direction. And we know that the multiplier in recessions of this kind go in both directions, and they're quite high, very high. We know that for sure. So if we want to talk about the two guns, and let me tell you that I don't believe anymore that monetary policy is relevant at all in the European debate for 3 reasons. It's ineffective because interest rates are almost to zero and we're not yet in a deflationary environment. It's contradictory because by now we have to understand Mr. Draghi when he says that he's not going to use monetary policy if there is no fiscal plan of austerity linked to it, which is ridiculous in terms. And as somebody's saying now in the United States, it also carries an implication of inequality. As we've seen, apparently the huge fiscal monetary expansion in the US has been geared to the first top 1% of American citizens. Fiscal policy to the country can be very, very effective, does not have contradiction in terms with Mr. Draghi, and is quite more equitable. So I'll go back to this. Let me talk about reforms. I have seen some very wrong reforms in Italy. I call them one, useless, like reforming the cab drivers when nobody takes a cab. Why was that a wrong reform? Because it made us lose a lot of time. Monti government lost at least 1 month out of that. And it loses consensus because people know that nobody takes a cab.
and Monti government loses consensus for real reforms. They can be damaging. Mrs. Fornero reform have been a disgrace. Talk to any entrepreneur, he will tell you that after Mr. Fornero reforms, in terms of cost of labor, they're hiring less, they have more cost. I am arriving to the point of saying that it's been a disgrace to do in a recession. Bob Solo, Mario, always says you don't do reforms in a recession because they create fear and pain. Well, Bob Solo is not needed when you ask to all big, large firms what they have done in terms of hiring of young employees after Mrs. Fornero reform on pension system has been approved. All hiring programs for youngs have been thrown in the trash for the next 3 years. And firms are surrounded by old people that don't want to stay in their working environment, and the young have not been hired. Then you have reforms that are announced and that are not done. We have an anti-corruption reform, and we have created an anti-corruption authority with 4 employees. They are 4 PhDs. But the OECD says it's a good reform. Then we have announced the reform of the payment system for late payments. And yesterday, Mr. Letta has taken 400 million out of 4 billion out of that reform. 4 billion is peanuts compared to the 70 billions that are due to this. This destroys the credibility of a reform. Spending review. The spending review has been a disaster. It's been linear cuts. That's not a spending review. Go anywhere. It's cuts across the board for the good people and the bad people. So let me go to the solution. My solutions are, 1, credible fiscal policy. To me, a credible fiscal policy, expansionary, is one that doesn't raise spreads. Is one that if Italy today goes and raises public spending or lowers taxes, spreads don't go up. What are the conditions for a credible fiscal policy? 1, it has to be coordinated. If Italy does it on its own, it's never going to go anywhere. We're going to have spreads jumping 200 points. If Merkel, Hollande, Mr. Letta go together and announce it, it's going to be a boost for spreads. Spreads are going to collapse, and bond markets are going to jump up. It has to be counter-cyclical, meaning that it has to be capable of convincing the markets, not now counter-cyclical, tomorrow, that when the sun comes up, something is going to happen that these countries are going to do what they've never done before, which is to be restrictive and austere when it's needed the most, i.e. when things are all right. So we need to do something about that today to convince market that when the expansion will come, this time we're not going to make the same mistakes. And then it has to be the right mix. If you lower taxes, I am sorry, I don't think anything is going to happen. People are so scared right now. They don't demand, consumption is down, investment is down. Lowering taxes is just going to raise savings. It's not going to help. Okay, so we raise spending. So how do we finance that spending? Well, you could finance it like Joe Stiglitz said to Mario Monti. You have raised all these taxes, don't repay back your debt. Just do more public spending. And I'm not talking only about investment, I'm talking about demand of goods. Well, there is a much better way, which is the one that Mario Baldassari said. We know from American Economic Review papers that have been published on Italy in 2009 that it's true that those 50 billions of spending exist. And I'm wrong to call them spending because they are not spending. They are a transfer. They are a transfer from us, the citizens, to an entrepreneur. They have nothing to do with demand. They don't generate GDP. But once you find this waste, which is not spending, and you use it to do spending, and when I say spending, I mean computers as much as bridges, that is public demand. The final thing, reforms. As Nicola said very well, we are killing people every day that passes. And especially we have killed the youngsters, and we have killed a huge amount of SMEs, which are the vitality of this country. The youngsters, we've wrote to Mr. Monti 2 years ago, 1,400 people, we've told them, there's no time, you can't wait for the youngsters. You will not hire any young people if you make the labor cost for youngsters lower because firms don't hire. We need a temporary relief program of hiring young people in the public sector for 1 year or 2 years so that they don't get suicidal, depressed, or they go to work for the Camorra and the Mafia. Nothing has been done in that sense. And when we sent that letter to Monti, youth unemployment was 10% below what it is today. The other thing is SMEs. If you talk to SMEs, they said, we have just received something called, I didn't even know, it's called SIS3. Now, SIS3 is something that a reform that has been put in this recession. It is a law that comes from Europe that says that every single firm, small or big, has to track dangerous waste. Okay, so what did Italy do? It is tracking all the waste, not only dangerous. So now small firms spend 2 days a month to deal with this incredible, monstrous ICT system, which is taking away all their energies. This has been put as a reform during this past year. This is exactly the contrary of what we should do. Let me just say one last thing. The only reform that will work is spending review. It is very bad that Mr. Letta does not mention that word, did not mention that word in the parliament the first day, and has not yet to start at least what Mr. Monti had started, which is to put a minister for the spending review. Not even that. And that is key. If we don't start that, markets are not going to believe any credible thing. I think that after you start a spending review, you can also fight tax evasion. If you fight now tax evasion during a recession like this one, you're going to have the country burning. If you have fighting tax evasion once you've shown that public spending is true spending and not waste, you will have the capacity to fight tax evasion too. I think it can be done. I think it needs to be done now, because in 1 year time, when the Prime Minister of Greece will go to Brussels to say that everything is fine, he will be stopped going to the airport by 4 terrorists with a Kalashnikov, and he will go on national TV to announce that Greece is out of the euro. And that will be done with a lot of cheering, because these terrorists will not be considered terrorists in Greece, but heroes. So we need to do this, all this, before the worst can happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you to you, Gustavo. And now Serena, by Istituto Bruno Leoni.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. All of you already pointed out that the Italian crisis is a combination of financial crisis and a previous more resistant internal crisis on productivity and growth. I heard here talking about economic tools, such as revenues or labor market solutions, employment, and so on. But I didn't hear before the intervention of Nicola Rossi on the prerequisites of the economic growth. He talked about the rule of the game, and I think that my brief speech follows the speech of Nicola Rossi on that issue. The theme is surely well known by all of you. Also, politicians now admit that we urge we urge for an economic growth, and more crucial for the wellness of the people, we urge to focus our attention on the institutional and legal framework. But the point is, what kind of legal issues are to be on the table of the politics? Now the rhetoric is concentrated on the form of government and on the electoral system above all. Surely they are key issues, but I don't hear much about other topical themes that, in my opinion, are central to redress Italy on a right path. I think of justice, certainty of the law, and the legal framework on revenues, so financial legislation. I don't need to explain to you which is the condition of our administration of justice. We pay millions of euros to the Strasbourg court for the length of our proceedings, especially on civil matters. This is both a fundamental right injury and an economic problem, not only for the common nations, issued by the ACTHR, but also because of the deterrent effect to start or to continue an economic activity. All of you know that we are at the bottom of the international ranks in resolving controversial issues. So this should be at the top of the political agenda, maybe more than the form of the government. Regarding revenue system and financial law on financial and taxes, the total tax rate for enterprises is around 68% versus an European rank that is around 42%. But the problem is not only the high level of taxation. This problem is well known by the public opinion, less known because maybe more technical, is the large or are the large violations of the rule of law by the fiscal administration. Just the last recent example, municipalities are going to collect the TARES tax, that is a sort of fiscal Frankenstein, a fiscal monster, that add a tax due for waste services, for waste management, plus a tax due for the indivisible cost of municipalities. Yet this sum of two different requirements is contrary to the basic principle of the law on revenues. But more than that, what is happened is that while the deadline for paying the first rate was incoming, the deadline by law, citizens didn't know who to pay to and how, because the government didn't take final decisions on that until the end. How people can have the courage to take economic initiatives if the fiscal system is such arbitrary and contrary to basic principles? Third, the certainty of the law. This is one of the most important value and principle. Is the principle of the rule of law, basically. Maybe is the most important at all. People need to live in a context where they can predict the consequences of their decisions and their attitudes. This is clear and maybe clearer when such consequences are legal, because we cannot choose the rules to be submitted to. Certainty is the fundamental value in general, and of course is a fundamental value in fields where our decisions can have effect in a medium or in a long term, such as in the economic field. But we live in a system that has completely forgot such a value. Again, the most recent example on that. In the last Council of Ministers, 3 days ago, the ILVA enterprise was put under temporary governmental administration by law, by the law decree that is quite ironically the ordinary way to legislate. While it is acceptable, I think it is not acceptable that by law the government take decisions for one specific case, typical a case in search of administrative solutions, with a non-secondary consequence that this law, born for a specific urgent situation, could be used in the future, introducing a new control of the economy under the discretion of politics. Reading the first article of this law decree, I have got a very profound shiver for the use of the law, for the abuse of the legislative power to solve particular situations, and for the condition of citizens, of Italians, that are submitted to the vicissitudes and the arbitrary of the monopolist of political power by the use of legislation that actually must be general and stable and not urgent and for administrative purpose. It could seem that these topics that I mentioned are unrelated with a way to solve our national economic problems and crises, but I'm convinced that, as I said at the beginning, they are the very prerequisite for the foundation of the wellness that need to be managed by people and not by the state. And for this reason, people need more than whole certainty and the respect of the rule of law that is not taken for granted in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serena. And then Tommaso Marzotto Cautorta.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, but I don't speak English. I prepared some chart in English for the foreign friend. Dopo aver ascoltato in questi 2 giorni illustri professori ed economisti, mi sono domandato come può inserirsi il piccolo strumento del capitale di rischio, dei business angel, l'angel investing in questo sistema, questo scenario macroeconomico, come può dare il suo contributo. La riflessione che facevo, che mi ha dato anche lo spunto il professor Di Giorgio, viene dal fatto della la riflessione, la considerazione di fondo che la Commissione europea 12 anni fa fece è che la crescita economica di un paese spesso dipende dalla possibilità o meno di incrocio, di incontro tra piccoli progetti ad alto potenziale e innovativi con il capitale di rischio di piccola dimensione. Se questo avviene, il processo di crescita di un paese e quindi di rigenerazione, di innovazione di un paese è molto accelerato e favorito. Se questo non avviene, è molto rallentato. Ed è per questo che 12 anni fa, ormai, o forse anche 13, la Commissione europea facilitò la crescita dei circuiti di angel investor in tutta Europa. Io sono fra i soci fondatori che 12 anni fa presero questo spunto e fondammo l'associazione IBAN, Italian Business Angel Network, che fa parte di un circuito europeo. E mi fa molto piacere condividere con voi oggi questa nostra piccola sfida e questo nostro piccolo progetto. Vi darò qualche numero, o meglio, prima capiamo chi sono gli angel investor. Gli angel investor sono persone private, sono persone con un'esperienza d'azienda che hanno qualche capitale disponibile e sono interessati a investire e a portare la loro competenza dentro un progetto innovativo ad elevato potenziale di crescita. Cosa assolutamente fondamentale, perché noi sappiamo che normalmente i piccoli progetti d'impresa hanno proprio, se va bene, hanno una buona idea, ma non hanno hanno scarsissima competenza di gestione d'impresa e cultura d'impresa e hanno pochissima dimestichezza con gli strumenti finanziari. Quindi qualcheduno che porta competenze e finanza nei primissimi momenti di vita, i più rischiosi di un progetto innovativo, questo è un elemento assolutamente virtuoso. E quindi è qualche cosa che in tutto il mondo ha avuto un grosso ruolo e si è sviluppato prima, 20-25 anni fa, nei paesi anglosassoni, da, ripeto, 10-12 anni in tutta Europa. Ed è qualche cosa che cresce e che va a riempire quel gap di tipo finanziario tipico delle primissime fasi di vita di un processo. L'angel investor può agire, come vedete, in 2 maniere, sia singolarmente che in gruppi, cioè in club di investitori. Questa è una chart che ci dice quello che sono gli strumenti della filiera del venture capital. Come tutti sapete, i primissimi, e sotto alla base vediamo i limiti dimensionali di investimento. Come vedete, il primo attore sono i cosiddetti friend and families. Se ho una buona idea, ne parlo con gli amici e parenti, se c'è qualche cosa lo mettiamo sul tavolo. Dopodiché subito entra o può entrare in ruolo, in gioco, la figura dell'angel investor. Come vedete, con dimensioni che vanno in Italia, Inghilterra, negli Stati Uniti, dai 30.000 euro sterline o dollari che siano, fino ai 500.000 euro. Questa è la dimensione dell'angel investor. Dopodiché, se l'angel investor e vuole uscire, perché è comunque un capitale di rischio e quindi di tipo temporaneo, preparerà le condizioni perché un investitore finanziario o industriale di maggiore livello possa entrare e quindi continuare a far crescere. Come vedete, quindi, l'angel investor gioca un ruolo virtuoso, indispensabile, che non esisteva in Italia e in Europa fino a una decina d'anni fa. Oggi consente che tutta una serie di start-up innovative di successo possa vedere la luce, crescere, e questo funziona. Per avere un'idea di quello che sono i numeri nel mondo, poi dopo vedremo dei numeri in Italia, come vedete sono numeri non indifferenti. In Inghilterra soltanto vi ricordo che, a forza di quelle cifre così minute, come ho detto prima, però i circuiti di angel investor intermediano più importi, più somme di quanti non investano gli investitori istituzionali nel capitale di rischio, nel venture capital. Quindi esiste addirittura un dipartimento del Ministero delle Finanze inglese che si occupa espressamente della normativa per l'angel investor. Quindi è qualcosa di assolutamente straordinario. Quindi, come vedete, sono numeri importanti. In Italia cosa succede? Succede che appunto nel 99 abbiamo accolto questa sfida, abbiamo creato l'associazione, abbiamo creato una serie di strumenti, di normativa, di piattaforma, di best practice, di studi, di approfondimento ogni anno, e li mettiamo a disposizione. Abbiamo ovviamente un'ottima collaborazione con i nostri colleghi del Venture Capital e Private Equity dell'associazione AIFI, che conoscete bene, e oggi noi stimiamo che ci sia in Italia attorno alle 500 persone. Secondo me ce ne sono anche di più, però note ce ne sono. Quindi questa è una comunità ancora abbastanza bassa. Come è strutturata l'associazione? L'associazione, c'è un'associazione nazionale tipo Confindustriale, istituzionale di riferimento della categoria, dopodiché ci sono tutta una serie di investitori privati che operano da solo, oppure delle nostre antenne che abbiamo attivato sul territorio. Ne abbiamo una dozzina tra club e antenne in giro per l'Italia, dove a loro volta sono accreditati degli investitori. Dopodiché ci sono due tipi di club: dei club tematici, il club dell'ICT, il club di investitori che investono solo nelle green technology e così via, invece che sono, diciamo, abbastanza interregionali, o sono dei club molto regionali. A Torino, a Milano, in Veneto, in Campania esistono dei club multisettoriali che raggruppano delle persone e investono sempre congiuntamente. Per avere dei numeri, la colonna intera sono i numeri dell'early stage in Italia, quelli in rosso sono i numeri raccolti dai nostri colleghi nel comparto early stage di AIFI, quelli in blu sono i nostri. Come vedete c'è un fatto che dopo qualche anno di stabilità, leggera crescita soprattutto delle operazioni un pochino più grosse, è successo qualche cosa. L'anno scorso il settore del comparto dell'early stage è, per così dire, esploso. in numeri relativi italiani, cioè è diventato qualcosa che attorno ai 160 milioni di euro, dove IBAN, gli angel investor singoli o piccole operazioni rappresenta sempre ormai stabilmente intorno ai 34-35 milioni, però il resto, no. Il che dice che è un comparto molto vivace. Se infatti andiamo a vedere il numero di operazioni dentro quegli importi, vediamo che le operazioni di angel investor sono molto più piccole ma molto più numerose. Noi l'anno scorso abbiamo raccolto qualcosa come 370 operazioni, per 34 milioni di euro sono 90.000 euro a operazione singola, il che vi dice che è poco, però se noi andiamo a vedere quante start-up sono state investite, vediamo che sono state investite circa 100 start-up, il che vuol dire che ogni start-up ha ricevuto circa 370.000 euro. Allora, sono importi piccoli, però, ripeto, preziosi e importantissimi. Dove investe l'angel investor? In Italia e nel mondo, per fortuna, investe un po' in tutti i settori. Certo, il settore dell'ICT è normalmente il più vivace perché c'è la bassissima soglia d'ingresso, però l'anno scorso, per esempio, è stato molto vivace il settore delle apparecchiature medicali o il settore della green economy. Quindi, come vedete, questo è un sistema, un prodotto, una finanza che può essere rivolta a qualsiasi settore. L'importante è che contenga un forte componente di innovazione e una forte componente di crescita, quindi potenziale di crescita. Vabbè, queste sono alcune considerazioni. Cosa che forse può essere interessante, prima di passare a alcune considerazioni di quello che stiamo facendo per il futuro, qui viene sistematizzato, cioè l'angel investing è vero che si chiama anche informal venture capital, però la Commissione europea e tutti noi nel circuito europeo abbiamo cercato di sistematizzare, dare trasparenza a questo strumento affinché sia presente in tutti i paesi, però in maniera nota, si sa come funziona. Il che cosa vuol dire? Che il compito normalmente sia un club, sia un'associazione, sia un'antenna sul territorio fa queste due cose fondamentali: individua, seleziona e forma la domanda e l'offerta sul territorio. È qualche cosa che ognuno sa dove andare a trovarla, la fa emergere, e dopodiché crea le condizioni affinché avvenga il matching. Al momento della creazione del matching cerca di fornire best practice, formazione, corsi di entrepreneurship, strumenti di coinvestimento, di fondi di seed capital, così, che favoriscono il nascere e il crescere di questa cosa. Però sostanzialmente questo è il vero solo processo. È un processo condiviso con tutti i colleghi europei e quindi diciamo ormai abbastanza trasparente e sperimentato. Finisco con due osservazioni che sono quelle che mi hanno un po' anche portato qua, attorno a questo tavolo, leggendo gli spunti di riflessione che ci avete dato, su cui innestare le nostre riflessioni, mi ha colpito molto e vorrei agganciarmi allo stimolo fornito da voi sull'importanza di ripartire dalla società civile. In effetti siamo perfettamente convinti che l'Italia è piena di eccellenze, di competenze molto spesso disprezzate, ignorate, non valorizzate. Ecco, ci ha fatto molto piacere che il governo precedente, nella persona del ministro Passera, abbia accolto in parte alcune nostre osservazioni su questo tema, e con la legge 221 del dicembre scorso sapete che è stata varata un incentivo agli investitori privati in start-up innovative, quindi il 19% del mio investimento in una start-up innovativa può essere dedotto dalla mia imposta lorda. Questa è la prima volta che succede in Italia. Se sono un'impresa che investe in una start-up innovativa o addirittura il 20%, e poi ci sono altre norme che facilitano tutto questo. Ecco, su questa scia e diciamo, avendo trovato una sintonia con il Ministero, abbiamo preparato anche un piccolo contributo che mi farebbe piacere anche condividere con voi, affinché diciamo, la presenza e l'importanza di chi propone queste misure sia ulteriormente rafforzata, che sono quella appunto di, come succede per esempio in Francia, ha avuto un enorme successo far emergere e affidare e riconoscere il ruolo virtuoso di manager in prepensionamento o in mobilità addirittura, perché sono detentori di grande patrimonio e di sapere aziendale, cosa di cui le start-up hanno estremo bisogno. Hanno qualche lira da parte e possono investire, fare il primo chip di investimento virtuoso, attorno al quale possono esserci altri strumenti. Allora, riconoscere da parte del governo italiano questo ruolo virtuoso e facilitare con un incentivo magari superiore al 19% a queste figure, affinché il travaso di sapere non vada disperso per le spiagge o per le beauty farm a perdere tempo, ma ritorni nell'impresa portando sapere e finanza. Altra piccola misura che abbiamo suggerito, che ci piace molto perché sta avendo un grande successo in paesi lontani tipo il Canada e il Cile, però la trovo molto interessante. Come sapete, le start-up spesso sono worldwide, girano al mondo e cercano la migliore casa che le ospita. Ecco, il poter attrarre progetti innovativi nati magari in giro all'estero, offrendo una sorta di visa start-up per ospitare in acceleratori di impresa con una fiscalità di vantaggio e così via, delle start-upari che vanno in giro per il mondo, se investiti da un angel investor che li fa da guida nel nostro paese, noi crediamo che sia una piccola misura molto virtuosa che sosteniamo e abbiamo preparato al governo. Molte altre cose ci sarebbero da dire, ma vi ringrazio per l'attenzione.
Grazie. Abbiamo così concluso la maratona degli interventi. It's like a marathon. I ask you whether you want to open a little floor discussion before closing the conference. Dominique?
Only a question of clarification. I was startled when you say the way the budget is made and disclosed. In other words, if you say that we prospect to increase the budget of 30%, then if we increase it only by 10%, we call it a 20% reduction.
Yeah.
But at the World Bank, at the IMF, all nations have to indicate or give the balance of payments in the format of the IMF. Each country has its own balance of payments, but then at the end of the year they have to transfer. Isn't the same thing happening in Europe? Or to go more bluntly, did Europe not know that Greece was falsifying its accounts? Or when Greek banks were failing, suddenly everyone realized? I mean, what?
In the official document I mentioned, every year there is a small table at the beginning which is called summary tables. In that summary tables, the reports, the rate of growth, macroeconomics figures, and then deficit and debt, and that's it. And I can add a further information. If you look through the document, Carlo knows very well, you have a table, usually it's table 3.A, where they put the figures for total public administration balance sheet. I mean, the consolidated total public administration balance. The first table is forecasted values. In the last row of the table, there is gross domestic product in current values with the figures projected to 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. Then you have the proposal of economic policy, and then you have a second table, which is 3B, which is the consolidated budget, consolidated balance sheet of total public administration, with some different numbers sometimes, which is we cut down this expenditure, not with respect to the previous year, the historical data, but with respect to the trend of the first table. And funny enough, this is a specific point I've been fight for 25 years. At the end of this second table, there is a row with gross domestic product. You can check it over the last 25 years. That gross domestic product is exactly the same gross domestic product before the application of economic policy. So why we do economic policy for? The answer was, well, but the deficit is different. So there is no feedback within the Treasury, within the Italian Treasury. There are no feedback after you have a trend, then you have to apply economic policy, then you don't have any feedback of this budget into the economic system and back again from the economic system into the government budget. These feedbacks have been excluded over the last 25 years. I've been fighting on this specific point when I was in government, when I was in majority, when I was at the opposition. No way out. I'm waiting now for the new document that the new government was engaged to issue within the end of this June, because obviously the Parliament approved the April document, but correctly, in the April document, there is no proposal in terms of economic policy, because that government was a resigning government, and they said, these are the forecasts. Then the new government should apply what kind of economic policy decision they intend to make. So I'm waiting until the end of June to see if that kind of mystery I expressed here is going to continue or not.
Clarified, I mean, a nation can do whatever it wants within the rules. However, at the end of the year, don't they have to present a budget, like each country presents at the IMF,
Sure.
Which has to be in the standard form, dictated?
Yeah.
So will
But it's
not
a
the
ruling-
European...
Yeah, in November we have to present the stability document, okay? So they have to put all the figures. But in any case, the figures are for future years. So if you do the trick I did, putting vertical and horizontal, you come out with the mystery. I mean, if you read in vertical, everything is correct. The Union asked Italy to cut down deficit by 20 billion euro. Okay, it's written 20 billion next year. Next year.
But, I mean, Greece, how could Greece...
No, Greece is a different
it's a
story.
different case, yes.
Greece is a different story.
Nobody knew?
It's a different story because
Yeah, of course.
what I'm telling is just within the normal statistical procedure. Okay. Now, Greece, it happens that in 6 months they corrected the historical data and the current data, and suddenly they passed it from 3% deficit to 16% deficit GDP in 6 months. They did many corrections, but was not for future years, was for the historical data.
The European Parliament each year published a book on the archive department, published a book on what they do. And last year published a very interesting book on the 10th anniversary of the introduction of euro. I mean, it's just that I know the director of these archives. They must just make archives research. They published a book on how was the discussion in the European Parliament about the entry into force of euro, I mean, as a real currency in 2002. And in 2002, if you remember, Greece joined the euro. Italy joined in 1998, but they joined in 2002. So in this book is published an appendix on how the parliament discussed about joining, because you need the approval of the parliament. It's amazing, because that was published last year in the middle of the crisis, and would have merit maybe some attention. The parliament had an extremely superficial approach, knowing very well and being very well informed of lousy accounting, not false, not falsification, but lousy. And there was the German member of parliament talking with of Social Democrats, who cut the discussion short and said, Greece is Greece, we all own too much for cultural reasons, blah, 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 blah. Greece has to join, that is point, it's a political decision. It's amazing that last year has been published the acts of 10 years ago, and that is the story.
You know, in 6 months, they did 3 different corrections, but not for future forecasts, but for historical data. We were wrong. They said we were wrong. But you know the story about when Italy entered the Eurozone? You know the story, okay? That we had 6% deficit GDP ratio and suddenly we had 3%. There has been a book, and Gustavo Piga knows something about that book. Okay, Carlo. Yeah.
If I can say just something of a more general tone, this is an issue of fiscal transparency, and although there are obvious cases like Greece, as I mentioned yesterday, unfortunately the state of the fiscal accounts of the world from the point of view of transparency is far from being adequate. We had about 13, 14 years ago, we had started a fiscal transparency process, which essentially initially was supported by the international community. It's the review was part of the standard codes set by the international community. There was a fiscal transparency standard. We would check with fiscal transparency of various countries. Maybe we would do 10 or 15 every year. The program has been disbanded, essentially for lack of interest. And now, only now, we are starting a new program of fiscal transparency. Even that, we have just done a fiscal transparency assessment for Ireland, one for Bolivia, one for Costa Rica, and the results will be published. But so far, we have not received the support, for example, from the G20. It is not an initiative that has been endorsed by the G20. It faces a lot of opposition because many governments don't like transparency. As I mentioned yesterday, there is an issue of China. In China, for example, of lack of sufficient information on local governments, and we're talking about big numbers of both deficit and debt. And I think they are improving. They realize it's an issue. But we are far from, as to the European Union, one basic thing, only now there seems to be an agreement on the accounting, on the fiscal accounting rule. Europe is moving towards the adoption of the European version of IPSAS, which is the standard for public sector accounting, but it's happening only now. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done in this area.
Yeah. We have to stop this because China has to provide data. Now, you cannot be a G20, a G2, or whatever. You know what happened. Ease of doing business, since they are 91 ranked countries, that is 91 out of 180, they want to suppress the report. In other words, first they don't provide the data, then they want to suppress the report. Then they do all things against the rule, and we have to accept that China has to be one of the countries that has to decide on the governance and so on. So this is, I mean, look at even democracy. China calls democracy. Taiwan has not been under China since 1904, okay, over 1 century, okay? And how did this is a country that voted to be democratic, to be separate, and China says, anyone who recognizes Taiwan, we will not deal with it. So Taiwan does not appear in any statistics except as a province of China. I mean, so this is, I'm not complaining about the IMF. I'm saying that something.
Just one question to the chairman. Are we under Chatham House rules? Okay. One question.
Everything is recorded.
Well recorded, and I hope stored somewhere that I cannot see. And
in a book.
I had a question to Carlo. When you go for, what is it called, Article 4, Article of Mission, and say that you ask a specific government to show you the derivative books, are they mandated, 2 questions, are they mandated to show it to you? And second of all, if they say that a government has a, yes, financial derivative, are they,
Switch on.
are they mandated to show it to you? And second question, if they are not mandated and then they say no, does the IMF specifies clearly that answer, no, has been received by the government in their report that gets published in the end?
Legally, there is a list of information that, based on the articles of the IMF, that the countries are supposed to give to the IMF. The wording, however, is very general, so at the end it will be a matter of interpretation to know whether the derivatives are included or not. Leaving aside the issue of governance, there are things that I think would be difficult for a government not to provide information to the IMF, but there may be issue of confidentiality, and therefore the government may say, okay, this is the information, but we would like this information not to be published. These things happen. There is a broader issue, however, that the IMF surveillance process does not have strong enforcement tools. Well, actually, it does not have enforcement tools. There are theoretical enforcement tools, but in practice, it's very difficult. China is a good example. There was a major revision of IMF surveillance in 2007, whereby essentially much more emphasis was given on our assessments of the exchange rate policies of various countries. And indeed, we were supposed to use labels if a country was running an exchange rate policy that led to a fundamentally misaligned exchange rate. It was a big controversial reform. I was at the center of that reform. And essentially, the reform was approved, but when it came to implementation, essentially what happened is that we did not have an Article 4 consultation with China for 2 years. So if a country refuses to speak with us, what do we do? At present, there are 3 countries for which we don't have Article 4 consultations: Venezuela, Argentina, and Ecuador, because they don't want to talk to us. What do we do? In principle, the executive board, after a certain procedure, could essentially kick them out of the IMF. That's a very extreme measure. IMF surveillance has always been based on a process of trying to convince countries that it is in their best interest to do certain things. The enforcement powers are very limited.
Well, surprisingly enough, but here in Italy, over the last 30 years, the final data on local government budget have been available maybe after 3-4 years. The real final budget data for local government. Giorgio? Oh, sorry.
I had a question about the person who presented the occasion for the question has left, that is Nicola Rossi. In a way, it's a bit a pity that people come, give the speech, and then leave, so you can't discuss anything. But the question maybe, and I'll address it to you. He mentioned that in Italy, we need rules of the game rather than reorganization. I don't understand what he meant, but since he's gone, it's too late perhaps to ask you. I'm sorry that people really come and leave, because people like me come yesterday and leave tonight.
Me too.
So anyway, it's a bit of a complaint.
But better they come than not. I mean, in some cases, there are a lot of business around. Well, you know, we have been talking each other since the last 4 or 5 years in the Senate, actually. I don't really understand what is specific issues. I understand that you have to change the rules, which? The rules of Senate procedure to take decisions, the rules between law decree and law, or, I mean, with respect to any kind of issues, I mean, not only economic policy. What you know, he used to say that he does agree in terms of macroeconomic policy, but you cannot implement that macroeconomic policy if you don't change the rules. As I said, my own proposal, it's very old actually, it make a law in which you say that we apply the ZBB. And the budget law for 2014 for any kind of public administration is as following. This is the law, which says that in these 10 items, or in these 7 items, the budget is the same amount you spent in 2012. That's it. I mean, is this a rule? I don't know if it can be considered a rule or just a political decision. But out of this, I don't see any kind of rule change that can change the figures. My opinion is that you want to change the figures, do exactly the same way many countries in Western countries used to do since 40 years ago. The debate about the application of the zero-based budgeting, we had a very long debate in 1978 during the approval in Italy of the new financial law. And in Andreatta, we did seminars close to here in Piazza Sant'Andrea della Valle. He invited the general director of the Congressional Budget Office. He gave us seminars trying to explain us how the U.S. administration were, that time, applying, you know, a form of ZBB. So is this a rule or is it a political choice? Or the other way around, could be an acceptable rule to debate all over TV, newspaper, in the parliament, in the Senate, to debate about 2015 figure to be cut by 10 billion euro without respect to what is that figure with respect to 2012, which is the last historical data. Is this a rule or is it a political decision to be made? I have been living for 30 years with this kind of question, so I don't understand when he said the rule. My proposal is change the rule. I mean, do not present the economic policy you support in terms of what is the differences with respect to future data. Give me the differences with respect to last year. That's very easy to be done. That's why we never, you know, in the last DEF document, April document, if you read the table, there is no balance, there is no zero deficit until 2018. Then if you read, they said, net of cycle, we almost balance the budget. But net of cycle, if you do that deficit in the next 5 years, this is just competence. But if you implement that deficit in terms of cash, you increase debt. You cannot say, I'm issuing bonds, but net of cycle, I shouldn't issue this bond. You're issuing bonds. I mean, you are increasing debt. And you cannot say, I issue the bonds, but net of cycle, I wouldn't be in the necessity of issuing bonds. This is really funny, fake. Like yesterday, Filippo Cavazzuti were in 81. Filippo Cavazzuti, Piero Giarda, a lot of friends in the Spending Review Commission that, again, Andreatta started in 1981. We were there. And since then, we knew that the kind of purchases in the different administration, if you buy this glass, since then, 32 years ago, we knew that in one administration this cost 5 cents, in another 25 cents, in another one maybe $1. We took, you know, the pen, the big pen, as an example. Okay. Then since then, we know that on the average, in each Italian hospital bed, in the accounting, they used to buy 8 syringes per bed per day. Okay, so we knew since 32 years ago. Last night we had a very nice broadcast called Porta a Porta, and was astonishing with the Minister of Health and with the anchorman, well known, who says, but this is a scandal, and they gave this figure. Oh, a syringe is cost 5 cents here, €1 there. We know since 30 years. Whenever I hear somebody speaking about spending review, I know that this is the way to cheat people. Because we know where. Suddenly enough, in the last 5 years, all the intermediate consumption in the health system, the total expenditure increased by 50% in the last 5 years. They jumped up from 45 billion to 70 billion, more or less, okay? So these are historical data, are there. What happened in the Italian health system over the last 5 years to make this big jump, not in the total expenditure. You may have wages, salaries, investments, whatever. No, I mean in this specific item. What happened? Cholera? What? No. There is no statistic proving that there is an increase of sickness, there is an increase of... There is no statistic. So what happened? And when I was in the Commission for Fiscal Federalism, they did the trick to take as a standard cost the average historical cost in 2010. In 2010, there had been already the big jump in that kind of cost. Then I made the proposal. That's why I didn't vote in that specific case. I made the proposal, okay, you wish to have the historical average rather than making a specific analysis, what is the standard cost. They did in Israel, I know very well what is the Israel reforms in health system. But I did the proposal. I said, okay, I will vote in favor of this proposal if you take the average of 2005 plus inflation. And they said, Mario, you understand what are you proposing? Yes, I know. You are proposing a cut of 15 billion euro. And I said, yes, I know. But why you propose the 2010 figures? Because they already included the big jump. So the message what is? Whatever robbery you've done until 2010, you can continue to do it in the next futures, not more of whatever you have done until 2010. So you cannot increase, but you, For the future, you can consider that if you pick it up 10%, 20%, 30%, you can do it in the future at the same kind of level. But Giorgio, la verità è che attorno a queste voci, sorry for the Italian, but you can understand, attorno a queste voci, quando vai a toccare i fondi perduti, quando io ho proposto la trasformazione in crediti d'imposta al Senato, l'ho detto anche pubblicamente, quindi lo posso anche dire qui che siamo in Chatham House, un direttore del Ministero dello Sviluppo che gestisce quel tipo di sussidi chiamò 4 colleghi senatori al telefono per dirgli: sarete mica matti di votare l'emendamento di Baldassari? Se passa quella roba lì, io non vi posso più dare una lira dopo. Testuale. E siccome i 4 colleghi erano indipendenti l'uno dall'altro, cioè me l'hanno riferito non il gruppo, ma prima uno, poi il giorno dopo un altro, evidentemente perché quel personaggio, quell'ufficio, quell'istituzione gestisce 2 miliardi di euro all'anno. E quindi è potere. Se non hai la forza politica per fare questo, non ne esci. Ok, thank you very much to the courageous survival to this long workshop. Grazie a tutti.